The day was bright, with a soft wind moving across the wide green fields of the golf course. It was one of those afternoons where the sky was clear and the sun gave everything a calm glow. Birds were chirping in the distance, and the sound of golf balls being struck echoed lightly across the grass. On this quiet day, a woman walked onto the course. She carried herself with calmness and confidence, but not in a loud way. She wasn't there to show off, she wasn't there to prove anything. She simply wanted to enjoy the game. Her golf bag rested comfortably on her shoulder, and her eyes scanned the field with focus. But soon she realized not everyone shared her calm spirit. A man nearby noticed her and smirked. He was the kind of player who enjoyed being the center of attention, loud with his jokes and always making sure people looked at him. From the moment he saw her, he didn't just see another golfer. He saw someone he thought didn't belong. "Looks like we're letting anyone play these days," he said loudly, making sure people around could hear. A couple of players turned their heads but didn't say a word. Some looked down, pretending not to notice. The woman, however, didn't respond. She simply placed her golf bag down, adjusted her glove, and got ready to play. The man chuckled to himself, walking a little closer. "Careful," he added. "This game isn't as easy as it looks. Not sure you'll be able to keep up." Again, no reaction from her. She lined up her club with the ball, steady hands, steady eyes. She had done this many times before. The man tilted his head, waiting for her to look at him, waiting for a reaction. But she gave him none. She swung smoothly, the ball flying forward with perfect rhythm. It wasn't the longest shot of the day, but it was straight and clean, better than many beginners could manage. Some onlookers gave small nods, impressed by her form. But the man wasn't impressed. Or maybe he was, but he refused to show it. He laughed, clapping sarcastically. "Not bad," he said in a mocking tone. "Beginner's luck, I guess." The woman adjusted her cap slightly, picked up her bag, and started walking toward the ball. Her calmness almost seemed to irritate him more. He wanted her to snap back, to answer him, to defend herself. But she didn't. Her silence made his words feel empty, like jokes that didn't land. As she walked, she could hear whispers. Other players were watching, wondering how long she would tolerate his comments. Some admired the way she ignored him. Some, however, stayed silent, not wanting to get involved. That's how things often were. Many people saw unfairness but chose to look away, hoping it would pass without them. The man wasn't done. He followed her with slow steps, still talking loudly enough for others to hear. "You know," he said, "golf is a tricky sport. It's not for everyone. Takes patience, skill, and experience. I don't expect you to last the whole round." Still no reply. She reached her ball, placed it carefully, and prepared for her next shot. Her swing was just as smooth as before, her eyes focused on the distance, not on the man. The ball traveled forward again, landing gracefully where she wanted it. By now, some people were starting to notice something different. Her movements weren't random. They weren't the clumsy shots of someone new to the game. She moved with quiet skill, the kind that came only from hours of practice. But the man didn't stop. He shook his head and grinned at the small group of players watching. "You see? She's trying, but golf isn't just about hitting a ball straight. It's about strategy. It's about knowing the game. She'll learn that soon enough." The woman stood still for a moment, looking out at the field. Her calmness seemed almost unshakable. She wasn't there to fight. She wasn't there to answer his taunts. She was there for the game, and only the game. As the two continued down the course, the difference between them became clearer. He was loud, restless, constantly looking for an audience. She was quiet, steady, with every movement measured. And though he thought he was in control of the moment, something deeper was already shifting. People were starting to watch her more than him. One caddy leaned to another and whispered, "You see her swing? That's not beginner's luck. That's practice. Serious practice." The other nodded silently. They could tell, even if the man couldn't, that she wasn't just another player walking in. She had something different about her, something hidden, something he hadn't yet realized. But for now, all he saw was someone he thought he could laugh at. And all she showed was patience, letting her actions speak louder than his words. The game had only just begun. The man's laughter carried across the course like an unwanted echo. Every time the woman prepared for her next shot, he found a way to speak up. It was as if he believed his voice was as important as the game itself. Some people on the sidelines shifted uncomfortably, but no one said anything. It wasn't unusual for golfers to joke with one another, but this didn't sound like friendly teasing. This was different. He clapped his hands loudly after one of her shots, saying, "Well, at least it didn't land in the water. You're lucky today." Then he grinned, clearly enjoying himself more than anyone else was. The woman adjusted her cap, wiped her hands lightly against her trousers, and walked forward. Her pace was steady, unhurried, as if she didn't hear him at all. But everyone could tell she heard him. She simply chose not to give him the satisfaction of reacting. This silence bothered him more than any reply could have. His face twitched slightly as if waiting for her to answer back, to argue, to prove him right. When she didn't, he only grew louder. "You know," he said, swinging his club in the air, "most people spend years learning this game. It's not something you just pick up one day and expect to master. That's why people like me are here, to set the example." A couple of players in the distance exchanged glances. They could see his ego stretching across the field, bigger than the sky. Yet the woman still said nothing. She walked with quiet focus, looking at the grass, the ball, the flag in the distance. To her, the game mattered more than his words. On the next hole, she bent down, set her ball, and leaned into her swing. Her body moved with precision, fluid, controlled, and balanced. The ball soared through the air, landing in a perfect spot that gave her an advantage for the next stroke. The sound of the strike echoed, sharp and clean. For a moment, there was silence. A couple of onlookers nodded. Even the man's grin faded for half a second. But then almost instantly he forced a laugh. "Not bad," he muttered, "but it's still early. He'll see how hard it gets later." She lifted her head slowly, not to look at him, but to scan the field ahead. Then she picked up her bag and walked forward again, her calmness steady like a shield. The man's voice chased her. "Tell you what, I'll give you some tips. Been playing for years. I could show you how it's really done." He smirked, swinging his club once more. He wanted her attention. He wanted her to admit she needed his help. But she never turned around. As they moved across the course, his taunts became almost routine. At every shot, at every step, he found a way to remind her that he thought she didn't belong there. He acted as though the field was his stage and she was a guest who had walked in uninvited. But others were starting to notice more than just his noise. They were watching her. The way she stood, the way she positioned her club, the way she didn't rush. Her style was quiet, but it spoke volumes. One older golfer whispered softly to another, "She plays differently. Watch her focus. That's not casual. That's skill." The other nodded but said nothing. Nobody wanted to draw attention to themselves while the man was still talking so loudly. Still, it was becoming clear. She wasn't just another player who had wandered in. She was here with purpose. The man, however, couldn't see it. His pride blinded him. He thought her silence was weakness when in truth it was strength. He thought his words were teaching her something, when in reality they were teaching everyone else something about him. At one point he tried to laugh with another group nearby, pointing toward her shot. "See that? She tries hard, I'll give her that. But golf isn't just about trying. It's about knowing the game." Nobody laughed with him. A couple of people smiled politely, but their eyes drifted back toward her. She was the one they wanted to watch. She reached her ball again, bent slightly, and lined up for another strike. The air grew quiet, almost heavy with anticipation. Even those who pretended not to care found themselves watching closely. Her swing came down smooth and powerful, and the ball soared again, landing almost exactly where she wanted it. The silence after that shot was louder than his laughter. The man shifted uncomfortably. For a moment it seemed like even he didn't know what to say, but he quickly forced another grin. Beginner's luck. It doesn't last. She placed her club back in the bag and walked calmly down the course. Her footsteps light and steady. With each hole the rhythm repeated, his voice loud, her silence steady and her shots clean. The contrast between them was like night and day, his energy burning out quickly, her focus only growing stronger. By now, a quiet tension filled the course. People wanted to see what would happen. Would she finally answer him? Would he finally stop? Or would the game itself provide the answer? Neither of them spoke out loud. As the sun shifted higher, shadows stretched across the field. The game was far from over, but something had already changed. She no longer seemed like the one being tested. Instead, it was him. Each of her silent, graceful shots placed more weight on his shoulders. Each calm step she took made his noise feel smaller, and though he didn't realize it yet, the more he mocked her, the more he revealed about himself, not about her. The crowd's eyes weren't on him anymore. They were on her. And in a game that was supposed to test patience and precision, she was proving that she had both in endless supply. The air on the golf course had started to change. At first it was filled only with the man's laughter and loud remarks, but slowly, something else was building. It was the quiet respect that began to grow each time the woman stepped up for her shot. Every swing she made carried a kind of confidence that was hard to ignore. It wasn't the confidence of someone trying to show off. It was the quiet, natural confidence of someone who knew exactly what they were doing. Her grip was steady, her shoulders relaxed, her eyes focused as though nothing around her could distract her. Even the caddies, who usually carried on with their own work, began paying attention. One of them leaned on his cart, watching closely as she set the ball, bent her knees just slightly and took her swing. The ball lifted into the air and curved perfectly toward the green, landing near the spot most golfers hoped for. The man who had been taunting her was quick to clap again, but this time it wasn't as loud as before. "Not bad," he muttered, trying to sound in control. "But golf is more than a few good shots. Let's see if you can keep it up." She didn't look at him. She didn't need to. Her silence was becoming heavier than his words. Each time she ignored him, it was like she was proving that he simply wasn't important. Some of the players watching from a distance whispered to one another. "Her swing is almost flawless," one said softly. "That's years of training, not luck." Another nodded, adding, "And look how calm she stays. Nothing rattles her." Meanwhile, the man grew more restless. He had expected her to stumble, to grow nervous, to answer back. Instead, she stayed calm and let her game speak. The calmness irritated him more than anything else. At the next hole, he decided to push harder. "Do you even know the rules?" he asked loudly. "Golf isn't just hitting a ball straight. There's strategy, positioning. It's a thinking person's game." Still no answer. She placed the ball carefully, tapped her club against the ground once, and focused. Her swing cut through the air, smooth and precise. The ball glided forward, bouncing softly on the fairway before rolling into a perfect spot for her next move. The small group watching couldn't hide their reactions anymore. A few clapped softly. Others shook their heads in quiet amazement. They had seen experienced players struggle to hit that cleanly, but she did it as if it was second nature. The man's smirk faded for a brief moment. He looked around, trying to see if anyone else noticed what he just saw. And they had. That bothered him even more. He quickly cleared his throat and said, "Consistency is the hard part. Anyone can get lucky a few times. Let's see if you can keep that up hole after hole." But deep inside, he had already noticed something he wouldn't admit. Her shots were not luck. They were skill. Real skill. The woman continued walking forward, her posture straight, her focus never breaking. She didn't need to argue. She didn't need to prove anything with words. The game itself was proving it for her. At one point, she paused near a small tree, adjusting her glove before her next swing. The man stood nearby, tapping his club against the ground impatiently. "Do you practice often?" he asked in a tone that wasn't friendly. "Because you'll need a lot more of it to really belong here." She glanced briefly at the flag in the distance, then returned her gaze to the ball. She didn't answer. Instead, she swung, and once again the ball flew perfectly down the course. This time, the reaction from the crowd was stronger. A few people actually clapped openly, and someone whistled quietly under their breath. The man's face tightened. He forced a laugh, but it sounded hollow now. "All right," he said, "all right. Not bad, but golf is a long game. You'll see how hard it gets later." The truth was, she had already shown enough for people to understand she wasn't just casually playing. Her movements had discipline, her swings had power, and her focus was unshakable. The caddy who had been watching from earlier leaned closer to another and whispered, "She's not just good. She's trained. That's a professional-level swing." The other caddy nodded, eyes fixed on her as she walked calmly to her ball again. By now, the man's voice was starting to lose its strength. He still tried to make jokes, still tried to talk loudly, but the more she played, the less anyone paid attention to him. People were watching her, waiting for her next move, and she never rushed. That was what struck people the most. She wasn't hurried by his words, she wasn't pressured by the eyes watching her. She took her time, breathed, adjusted, and swung with precision every time. It was clear she wasn't there for the attention. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She was simply playing her game, and the game itself was enough to make people notice. The man crossed his arms, muttering to himself as she landed yet another clean shot. He tried to laugh again, but even he knew it wasn't convincing anymore. His own shots, though decent, didn't carry the same weight. Each of hers looked effortless, while his seemed forced. The silence between his comments grew longer. At first he had spoken after every shot, but now he waited, hesitating before opening his mouth. It was as if he was trying to think of what to say, but nothing seemed strong enough anymore. The woman kept moving forward, calm as ever, her eyes only on the game. With each swing, she was slowly shifting the entire mood of the course. And though no one said it out loud, everyone could feel it. She was not the one being tested anymore. It was him. Every step she took made his words sound smaller. Every swing she made turned more eyes toward her and fewer toward him. And deep down, though he tried to hide it, the man had started to realize something he didn't want to admit. She wasn't a beginner. She wasn't someone who stumbled onto the course without knowing what she was doing. She was something else entirely. And with every quiet, graceful swing, she was proving it. The game had gone on long enough that people around the course couldn't ignore what was happening anymore. At first it had seemed like just another afternoon, players moving from hole to hole, the sound of swings cutting through the air, the soft roll of golf carts moving along the path. But something was different now. The woman who had walked onto the field quietly and without fuss was no longer just another player. She had become the center of attention. Every swing she made was being watched. Every step she took carried a kind of weight that no one could explain. Even people who hadn't been following the match at the start were now stopping, pausing for a few minutes just to see her play. And then came the shot that changed everything. The hole was long and tricky, the kind that tested even experienced golfers. The wind had picked up slightly, carrying across the wide stretch of grass. The flag in the distance waved gently, a reminder of how far the ball would have to travel. The man smirked as she prepared. He was certain this would be the moment where her luck would run out. He tapped his club against the ground and said loudly, "This is where it gets real. Let's see how you handle a shot like this." The woman bent down calmly, placing her ball carefully. She stood up straight, took a deep breath, and adjusted her stance. Her hands gripped the club lightly, not too tight, not too loose. She took a moment, letting her eyes measure the distance. The man folded his arms, waiting. A few people leaned forward slightly, eager to see what would happen. She swung. The sound of the strike was sharp and clear, the kind of sound that made heads turn instantly. The ball rose into the air, climbing higher and higher before curving beautifully through the sky. It traveled far, straight and strong, cutting across the course with perfect precision. Then, as if guided by invisible hands, it dropped down softly, landing just a short distance from the pin. For a moment, there was silence, absolute silence, then came the gasp. A ripple of surprise moved through the small crowd. A few people clapped without even thinking. Someone let out a low whistle, unable to hide their shock. The man's grin froze. His eyes widened just slightly before he forced them back into a squint. He cleared his throat, pretending to brush something off his sleeve as if he wasn't impressed. He muttered. Not bad. Not bad at all. But his voice lacked the confidence it had carried earlier. The woman, however, didn't celebrate. She didn't pump her fist in victory or look around for approval. She simply picked up her bag and began walking forward, her calm expression unchanged. It was this calmness that spoke louder than anything else. She didn't need to show off. She didn't need to respond to the gasps or the clapping. Her game was enough. As she walked, whispers started to spread. Some of the older players began to recognize her. A few leaned closer to one another, speaking quietly. "I've seen that swing before," one said. "That's not a casual player's form. That's training. That's years of study." Another added, "Wait a minute. Isn't she the one who worked with some of the pros? The one who studies the mental side of the game?" The murmurs grew. Word began to travel quickly across the course. She wasn't just a quiet woman playing golf. She was someone who had studied sports deeply, who had worked behind the scenes with athletes, teaching them how to sharpen their minds as much as their bodies. One person whispered, "She's a sports psychologist, isn't she? I read about her once. She's helped champions train their focus." The realization spread like wildfire. By now, almost everyone watching understood that she wasn't a beginner at all. She was someone whose knowledge and skill had shaped some of the best players in the game. The man, still standing near his ball, didn't seem to notice the whispers at first. He tried to keep his act going, smiling wide and shaking his head as though nothing unusual had happened. But when he glanced around, he noticed something that shook him. People weren't looking at him anymore. Their eyes were on her. Their smiles, their whispers, their nods of respect, all of it was directed toward her. His face stiffened. For the first time, he seemed unsure of himself. The laughter he had leaned on so heavily now felt out of place, almost embarrassing. He tightened his grip on his club and muttered, "One good shot doesn't make a golfer." But the words sounded thin, as if he didn't believe them himself. The woman reached her ball near the pin. She lined up her putt, calm and steady. The crowd grew quiet again. With one smooth motion, she tapped the ball and it rolled forward straight into the hole. The soft sound of the ball dropping in echoed louder than his earlier laughter. This time, the claps were louder. A few people even cheered quietly, careful not to break the calm atmosphere of the course. But the excitement was clear. She had done something most players only dreamed of. The man stood frozen, his club resting against the ground. His face carried a strange mix of frustration and disbelief. He had thought she would stumble, but instead she had risen higher with every step. The woman didn't look at him. She didn't need to. Her actions had spoken far louder than any words ever could. She simply walked on, her posture calm, her head held steady. The whispers followed her like a trail. People spoke softly about her achievements, her intelligence, her hidden role in shaping the game for others. The more they whispered, the more the man realized how foolish he had been. He had thought he was mocking a beginner. In truth, he had been mocking someone who knew more about the game, about its mental strength, its discipline, its patience than he ever could, and now, with every eye turned toward her, he finally felt what he had tried so hard to make her feel: small. The course was the same. The sun was the same, the grass was the same, but everything had changed. The respect had shifted. The silence had shifted, and the woman who had never said a word back to him had revealed herself not through anger, not through argument, but through skill and quiet dignity. She had shown everyone who she truly was. The round was coming to an end, but the silence on the golf course was louder than any laughter that had filled it earlier. The woman walked calmly, her step steady, her posture the same as it had been from the very beginning. She had never raised her voice, never argued, never once tried to defend herself. She had only played the game, and by playing the game with patience and skill, she had already won something bigger than the match. The man followed behind, his earlier grin now gone. His shoulders looked heavier, as though carrying something he hadn't expected to carry. He tapped his club against the grass a couple of times, more out of nervous habit than confidence. He wanted to say something, to throw out another remark, but the words just wouldn't come. Each time he tried, he glanced around and saw the eyes of the people watching. They weren't looking at him anymore. Their expressions weren't amused by his loudness anymore. Instead, they were filled with respect for her, and that respect made it impossible for him to continue the way he had before. The woman stopped at her next ball, placed it carefully, and lined up for her final shot. The crowd grew quiet once again. Even those who had been walking by paused to see her finish. She lifted her club, swung smoothly, and the ball glided across the green. It rolled, curved gently, and dropped straight into the hole. The sound of it falling in was soft, but it carried weight. People clapped, some even smiling wide as if they had just witnessed something rare. A few exchanged words, quietly saying how incredible she was. The man lowered his head. His hands tightened around his club, and for a moment he stood frozen. It was the very thing he had tried to deny all along: her skill, her presence, her place on that course. And now there was no denying it. The woman didn't look at him. She didn't need to. She simply walked forward, picked up her ball, and gave a small nod of thanks to those who had clapped. Her face showed no pride, no arrogance, only the same calm dignity she had carried since the first step onto the course. For the crowd, it was unforgettable. They had seen something more than just a game. They had seen patience outlast arrogance. They had seen skill silence noise. They had seen dignity win without ever lifting its voice. The man, however, felt smaller than he ever had. All his words, all his mocking, all his laughter, it now seemed pointless. He had tried to use them to show power, but they had only shown weakness. He thought back to when he first saw her arrive. In his mind, he had judged her instantly. He hadn't seen her as a player. He hadn't seen her as a competitor. He had only seen his own ideas, his own prejudices. And now, after all of that, she had shown him, without ever saying a word, that he had been wrong. The lesson stung. Not because she had humiliated him, she hadn't even tried to. The sting came from realizing that he had humiliated himself. As the crowd slowly began to drift away, people kept talking about her. Some spoke about her swing, others about her calmness, and some about her hidden story. They shared what they had heard about her work, about how she had trained and guided top players in the sport. Word spread quickly, and with each passing minute, her quiet presence grew into something legendary. The man walked slowly back toward the clubhouse, his steps heavy. He no longer felt like talking, no longer felt like laughing. He carried his bag, but it wasn't the weight of the clubs that pulled at him. It was the weight of what he had learned. The woman, meanwhile, stayed on the course for a few more minutes. She took in the sight of the green, the quiet sky above, the soft breeze moving across the trees. To her, it wasn't about victory or applause. It was about the love of the game, the peace of focus, the joy of playing with discipline. She left just as quietly as she had arrived, her presence calm and steady, leaving behind a silence that was somehow louder than any cheer. And long after she was gone, people still talked about her. They remembered how she played, how she never reacted, how she carried herself. Her story became one of those whispered lessons, about patience, about strength, about dignity in the face of arrogance. The man never forgot it either. Every time he stepped onto a golf course after that day, he remembered her. He remembered the way she ignored his taunts, the way she focused on her game, and the way she revealed her true self without saying a single harsh word. It was humbling. It was the kind of lesson that stays with you, not just on the golf course, but in life. Because what he learned that day was bigger than golf. He learned that respect is not something you demand, it's something you earn. He learned that arrogance can be silenced not by louder words, but by quiet excellence. He learned that sometimes the strongest reply is no reply at all. The course eventually returned to normal. Other players came and went, other games were played. The sound of laughter, chatter, and swinging clubs filled the air again. But for those who had been there that day, the memory remained. They had witnessed something rare, not just a game of golf, but a reminder of what patience, focus, and quiet strength can achieve. And so, the story spread. Some told it as a tale of an arrogant man humbled. Others told it as a story of a hidden genius revealed. But no matter how they shared it, the heart of the story was always the same. On that golf course, in the face of taunts and noise, one woman showed that true greatness doesn't need to shout. It only needs to be lived.